and it's recording in English, not American English. So it might there might be some big blanks in here.
Well, it's the accent that'll kill all of
Yeah.
us.
Well, we'll get AI to fix that. Don't worry. So,
Yeah.
so the recording, I must advise anybody who's here that the recording has started. So, Becky Winston of CPM, College of Performance Management.
Yeah, I want to welcome everybody. I ran across Craig when I was looking at some stuff from the Department of Energy, who used to be one of my big clients until the shutdown. And he was speaking at another conference, and I sort of glanced through the write-up and that and contacted him. It's one of those cold contacts that we all dread doing, but we need to do if we're going to move ahead. And Craig runs the software development team, which is behind the what's known as the PARS system in DOE, which is the project assessment and reporting system. And he works for a DOE contractor, and his team has been working to help integrate the AI tooling into the PARS system, which is inside another whole government system. So I am going to turn it over to Craig. Steve, after you welcome your crew.
Well, yes, indeed. This is the sort of, what would you call it? The roundabout conversation club going between the US and the UK. We've been going for several months now, and again, the conversation club was initially formed, but amongst COVID-smitten practitioners who couldn't get out and practice or do conferences or anything like that. So we've over the last few years, we've had many speakers join us for these conversations, and then which the conversation club itself, the membership in the UK has built up to nearing 200 senior project professional and practitioners. They're probably all too busy today, I would imagine, to make it at 5:30. But we are recording this, and as usual, it will be topped and tailed and edited to remove any expletives or nasty things that are said, or jokes even, to be brought to be circulated on the YouTube channel earlier next week. So Monday or Tuesday we'll have that recording. So welcome everybody. Welcome to our friends from across the Atlantic, and welcome very much to Craig. Looking forward to hearing you talk, and hopefully we can jump in and interrupt if we've got something to say or ask.
Yes, by all means.
Yeah.
We've got a small group here today, so ask your questions.
Yeah.
Let's make this a conversation.
Yes, indeed.
Rather than reading a PowerPoint to you guys, although I do have a PowerPoint from the presentation last week, I figured it's far more fun to talk for a little bit and then just jump right into the tool I've built, show you how it works, talk about what's going on behind the scenes, and talk about how people are starting to figure out how to use this as an effective way to do project management tasks, and to some degree, mostly just to write their emails for them, but there's a lot of value in that too. I'm here to help however we can, even if it's the less exciting stuff. So let me share my screen, and I'm going to introduce you all to Walt. You guys can see my screen?
Yeah, we got it.
Yes.
So this is Walt. He's our avatar of AI for project management at DOE PM, and he's available to all users of the PARS system. So it's about 600 people right now. Some of them at HQ in DC, or a lot of them are not in DC right now, but hopefully they will be again soon. And then a whole bunch of people over at the National Labs, DOE site. It's basically anyone who's building anything at the Department of Energy has to have someone on standby to come and upload data into our system, PARS. Walt,
Craig, do you have users at the Germantown facilities also?
Yes.
Okay.
Technically, me and my team sometimes work there.
Okay.
Office of Science at DOE has a big presence at the Germantown facilities, and Office of Science is big for uploading data to PARS as well.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, I would be surprised if there's a significant DOE site where we don't have at least one person who has a PARS account.
Okay.
When we first rolled out Walt, it was early 2023. Gen AI was very new. ChatGPT wasn't something that most people had tried. So that's when I said, okay, well, this guy needs a name and a picture, make him as approachable and friendly as possible. And that's when Walt was born. Since then, he's evolved a bit. People are now more used to having a disembodied, nameless AI, but we couldn't get rid of Walt. So here he is. And he's always ready to be helpful. And these days, he has significantly more capabilities. He has access to most data that's sitting in the PARS system and can dig through it, can do reports on it, and things like that. So I'm going to show you a quick
Craig,
introduction
can
to
you
what he
tell
can do.
people what's in the PARS system, the type of data?
Yeah, so it is the cost and schedule data for all of these construction projects, as well as overall project management data, everything from, who's managing it, what the initial budget was at critical decision 0, that's, when someone had an idea, through to critical decision 2, which is when the plan was locked in, and then how much it cost at various points in the process, whether it's over or under budget. Things like monthly assessments from DOE Office of Project Management, the program offices, so Office of Science, National Nuclear Security Administration, whoever it is that owns the project from a program level, and then also assessments from the project managers and the federal project directors who are on site looking at things. So, and then we also collect extensive documentation, all the formal documents for each phase of the project get stashed and organized in PARS. The idea is they're there for reference, and also the hope is that they'll actually be read by someone in the future for reference for future projects and lessons learned and things like that. But I think we all probably know that's more of an ideal than the reality in many cases. And that was one of my goals here with building this system that can dig through documents and find useful information much more easily than clicking through web pages and hoping for the best. So I'm going to give you a quick example of something that Walt can do with our projects. So much like ChatGPT, he's going to go through and he's going to do things. You can see here he's telling us what his plan is going to be. He just ran some SQL here, got some results behind the scenes from our database, and he is now telling us which of the projects are doing the best. And you'll know I just said performing the best. I didn't tell him what performing the best actually means. He kind of went and made some assumptions there based on that because he understands project management. He looked at the CPI and the SPI. That seems fair enough. And it looks like we have some pretty high performing projects right here. Looks like I got a question there.
Hi, Craig. This is Daryl Mesa. How you doing?
Hey, Daryl. How are you doing?
Doing good. I wanted to ask, what large language model are you using within the DOE system with Walt? Are you switching it out between different models, or you're sticking to one flavored model?
This is using GPT-4o, specifically running in the Azure Gov environment in Azure OpenAI, which is the only reason I'm allowed to actually put PARS data into a large language model at all, because it's one that's run in a government data center.
Gotcha. So
now, I only have limited options within that environment. So GPT-4o is basically the best we have access to.
So within the Azure environment, I know there's different large language models you can select. Have you considered exploring that, or is that just the basic standard?
So within Azure Gov, unfortunately, because it has all those additional government security standards, we have choices, but the choices are basically GPT 3.5, GPT-4 and GPT-4o, and I think GPT-4o Mini, which is the same thing but faster and slightly worse. So I've played with them all. There's really not much opportunity to experiment beyond that. I have done a little bit of work experimenting with hosting our own open source models within our secure environment, because obviously if we're controlling those on our own servers, we could run whichever ones we want, unless they're Chinese. The government doesn't prefer us to do that. But of all the American-based open source models, we can try those. For our use case, I found that the available GPUs inside Azure Gov limit us. So basically, to get similar performance to what we can get for GPT-4o, we'd be paying about $5,000 a month worth of GPUs. And when we buy it from Azure OpenAI per token, we are not anywhere remotely close to $5,000 a month worth of actual usage. So it just financially doesn't make sense for us.
Craig,
Gotcha.
Josh has a question.
Yes.
You're muted,
Yes,
Josh.
I was wondering, just real quick, is performance being measured against the contractor's current baseline, or are you able to set older baselines in there? So, for example, I know that some of the contractors tend to change their baseline regularly. So, is the performance here representative of reality, or just against their most current baseline?
So when we're talking EV values in PARS, we are talking against the current approved baseline. Most of the time that, when the project was struggling a bit a few years ago, likely there was a baseline change proposal, BCP, that went through, whole lot of paperwork went through, and they got approved to rebaseline, descope, however that is. The numbers that Walt has access to are pre-calculated roll-up style numbers, so they're based on that, because that's what DOE PM typically works with when we're doing this kind of analysis. If I wanted to find out, compared to the original baseline kind of numbers, we do have that data in PARS. It's not particularly accessible to Walt right now. A lot of what we've recently been doing in terms of AI engineering and sort of context engineering and tool development for Walt has basically been around simplifying the way the PARS backend data and databases are presented to Walt in order to make it as easy as possible for him to make good decisions about it. Rebecca?
Got it, thanks.
Yeah, I'm just curious because I think, as most PMs know, the SPI and the CPI doesn't present a very complete picture. Are there other databases that DOE is accessing for analysis purposes? Do they have updated risk registers that they can access on these? Because one of my concerns in government, and DOE is not the only group that does this, they just pull up the SPI, CPI, occasionally SVCV, and that's what they're relying on. And I'm just curious whether they're doing other databases for the purposes of doing analysis, or are there future plans?
So there's definitely a lot more to it than SPI and CPI. It is definitely, in this context, if I'm looking to pull up a bunch of random projects and tell it to sort by them, that's what Walt's going to use. But we do have, more numbers going down behind that. And these are still, rolled up numbers.
Right.
We're collecting it all the way down, and your actual analysts at DOE do tend to, use more complex tools and dig into what's going on and why and where and how it could be fixed, things like that. So I'd say SPI and CPI are definitely a simplification in terms of how DOE PM uses things.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, if someone at DOE PM was interested in how a project's doing, they're not even going to go and look at these right away. They're probably going to go and look at the project assessments from the humans. Mostly, I think they're humans. I think people may be starting to use ChatGPT for those, or Walt to help with those. But the actual human assessment in words, which tells them a lot more.
Yeah, before the shutdown, I had one of the folks tell me what they're doing is they bring this up and then get on the phone and call the site to figure out what's currently happening. Andrew has a comment.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah. Hi, Craig. I mean, you haven't really got going, and you've already got like a forest of questions and comments from all of us. So you've obviously touched a nerve here. One of the things that I was just when I was explaining before we started, because I've been an academic, and what I'm interested in is this. I was just talking about it last week. Is this difference between projects that are presented really quite neatly versus the reality, which is that there's an incredible amount of noise and concern that wouldn't be picked up. You know, the reports are kind of sterilized, and as you say, they're rolled up and and presented at summary level. But could Walt identify how messy a project is? I'm thinking about, you know, differences of agreement, fact that memos are flying around, change notices are being put in. I mean, there's projects that will run really by the numbers, and then there'll be these other ones that are kind of all over the place. Can Walt actually identify that in any way?
I would have to think about how to do that. So Walt has tools to do things like searching across the set of documents that have been uploaded, right? So potentially I could ask him something like to look around within those documents for disagreements, or maybe I could ask him, let's see, well, this one doesn't seem to have assessments from everyone, but no, it's got FPD assessments. Okay, so it's got FPD assessments and PMOA assessments, which when the project, bad example here, we got a project that's doing really well, so the assessments tend to be briefer. They get larger and more complicated when we have a project that's not performing quite as well, but I'm also not trying to put anyone on display here as being the least happy projects we've got. But we could potentially ask Walt to look at places where is the FPD's assessment disagreeing with the program's assessment, disagreeing with the Office of Project Management's assessment. If we've got 3 different stories being told, that's probably an indication that something's not being fully explored. At DOE, you know, if you've got things like this project's been rescoped 3 times over the last 10, 20 years, well, that project's probably got some congressional attention on it, and GAO's probably written a report or 2 at that point as well. You know, it really depends on the scale of the project. I think mostly at DOE, because of the scale and the budget of projects, when things are going wrong, people have noticed and people have probably written about it. It's just rather hard to put these big projects back on track by the time they've noticed they've gone wrong. And so maybe a lot of what we're trying to do is identify that earlier in the process.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you.
Josh?
Yeah, I know we keep distracting you here, but
this is what I'm here for.
Yeah, if you ask the question about a particular project, let's just pick one. If you scrolled up,
let's see what's the project. I'm going to try not to do anything plutonium related.
Okay.
Let's see, electron ion collider. That's a science project. 1276.
If you were to pick that project and say, ask it, if the project completion dates have changed in the last 3 months.
I'm going to include and overall for you there because I happen to know that they don't tend to update the estimates they put into PARS very often. Oh, so here we go. This one's saying no one's estimated a forecast completion for this one. So the FPDs are not forecasting a particular completion, possibly because they're not required to put in assessments there, And maybe this project's an older one, or it's a newer one,
Well,
or
it
maybe
says
Walt's done something wrong.
CD3A too, so it may not be
Oh,
fully
it's
baseline.
You're correct. So it's a CD3A. That's a good point, which means it's not going to have all of these numbers in there. All right. What do we have? Alpha 2 complex demolition. We've got 1262. We might have some more useful information on this one. All right, so it's looking like it's telling us that it's going to be done on Halloween in 2028.
Yeah, this is the so we've been doing a lot of study on forecasting. I find that the optimistic rates generally fall in EM between 40% and project Office of Science of about 240% optimistic, which means underperformed to forecast. And I noticed that the dates always move out incrementally, but you can actually predict that end date based on their month to over month forecast. But we only see it incrementally in DOE because they only update it incrementally. So I was just curious if it could do that. It's awesome.
Yeah. So in this case, I also, I'm looking at the high performing projects here. So the fact that its schedule isn't slipping is probably to be expected. But the nice thing about that is what we were essentially just doing here is we were doing a bunch of SQL queries. Most good data analysts can hop in and do a bunch of SQL queries, no problem. But I didn't have to know what the SQL database were, what the fields were. I could just ask Walt questions and he did that. So the idea here is bringing these analysis capabilities to the people who actually need them rather than having to wait on an email from an analyst who's got 6 other things to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Craig, I'm just curious, as was highlighted by some of your queries, some of these are still in the CD approval stage processing. Do you guys actually put in any of the recommendations or anything like that from these CD reviews? That's always been a question of mine when I'm looking at data that's being produced by a project, especially when they're waiting for their CD4 approval or have just achieved it, because it puts a new light on the data that I'm looking at based on the comments of the technical and project management, project control reviewers of the data.
So the answer for 1262 is either that they haven't been uploaded or Walt wasn't able to find them. Now, usually they are required to upload at least the approval documents. So I'm wondering if that's just because Walt's search wasn't correct.
Okay.
It depends based on the project and based on the office what they actually upload. There's certain requirements in DOE Order 413 that certain documents must be in PARS, and they're typically pretty good about getting them in. Right now, we're not chasing after people too hard for missing documents because, a lot of them aren't working. But in general, we do expect them to have the basic documents. We also encourage organizations to put in more, but that's more of a optional thing they may or may not want to share, especially when it starts to get into NNSA things. We're not a classified system, and so we don't want a lot of the more detailed technical stuff in our system. They can handle that on their side.
Yeah, I understand that. My concern is if I can't bring up recommendations and findings from some of these approval documents, I have a hard time looking at that data and trying to do any type of full-fledged analysis other than, it has an EAC or it doesn't, I can compare it against what they're supposedly budgeted for or scheduled for, but that doesn't, it's not as much of a real picture, and I don't know which one of the findings or recommendations that they've actually handled or completed, or if they consider them completely outside of the budget. So it's, to me, it's very hard to do a full-fledged analysis, and that's historically been a problem in DOE.
Yeah, I
It's
completely
historically
agree
a
with you
problem
there.
in DOD.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that is in my backlog of AI projects, shall we say, is I know that DOE PM has, I think it's basically a SharePoint or a shared folder with essentially every document they've ever collected from one of their on-site project reviews. That is not the same as the list of documents that are in PARS. Every single document in PARS needs to be categorized, checked, labeled, and generally organized so that it can be easily found and referenced and all of that.
Yeah,
That
to make it a usable database. Yeah.
That was a task that was likely never going to be done before the advent of AI, because no one's got time to read. We're talking about 100,000 documents, each of them dozens of pages, if not hundreds of pages. Now that we have AI available, that is one of the things that I'm hoping to spend some time on, maybe in the coming year, is getting through that backlog.
Yeah. Just current documentation would be a big leap.
Yeah.
Steve, you had your hand up. Did you have a question?
Well, kind of, but it was sort of, I don't know whether it was going back to Andrew's point, but again, as the conversation has rolled on, and getting more into the examination of communications and text, I don't know whether, to Andrew's point, that you might want to focus on if there is a well-developed stakeholder management structure with a well-developed comms plan, where you could trace perhaps the frequency and the level at which some of the documentation is floating around, and do textual analysis on that to see whether there are problems ahead or problems afoot, and maybe examine it for potential suggested remedies, or how objection handling could be managed, or to placate some of these more important stakeholders. And similarly, I was wondering whether reviews and the analytics of what's coming up and going through the change management board, if you have change boards within your major projects as well, because I would again thought that the greater the frequency of change, the more likely there is to be potentially some question marks over, or I will be querying the frequency of change could be equated to a not particularly good scope in the first place, and pointing to problems of definition of what the purpose and the point of the project was in the first place as people reach that. Just a thought, but I'm thinking that with the ability for AI to be able to scan and read and interpret text and shapes and forms of phraseology, then possibly that is going to again become an achievable objective without it getting too personal, or asking it to write for those memos that have been written in blood.
You are dead accurate on that, and that starts to get into the limitations I'm already finding in terms of what we can do with textual analysis from our perspective at DOE PM, because we are, the central repository, the organization operating for headquarters in DC. We don't have any of that insight into what's happening day to day in the projects. We get the documents that they've carefully reviewed and extracted all the disagreement from, and that's what we actually get to see.
It's kind of like the difference between the facts and the truth, isn't it? The truth is often very well smoothed over facts to make it palatable and tolerable. Yeah, but
the problem with DOE is they operate. The problem with DOE is they operate a lot like a corporation with a bunch of wholly owned subsidiaries.
Yep.
So the field offices and area offices operate as much as possible. They take advantage of it to operate completely independent of the HQ function of DOE. Daryl, you had a question?
Yeah, Craig, have you done any benchmarks on how much Walt lied to you in regards to the data it's giving you?
Yes. So I've done a few different benchmarks as I was trying to improve these kinds of prompts, and taking it with a grain of salt, since the benchmarks are also AI generated, and AIs hallucinate all the way down. We are at about a 14% hallucination rate, in the sense that whenever it analyzes the outputs of complex tasks, it identifies, on average, about 14% of the content isn't necessarily backed by the data it gives you. That doesn't necessarily mean it's making stuff up so much as that also tends to do a false positive on anything that isn't directly from the data. So anywhere here you can see that it's making a logical deduction or a leap about why this might have happened. So not sure quite where there's an example of that. But basically, yeah, it can sometimes draw additional issues. Now, compared to not including the information at all, obviously it's significantly better on hallucination. And you can see here, this graph or this chart kind of shows how over time we were able to decrease the hallucination by iterating on the way that our prompts and our tools worked to make sure that it was actually pulling the right data that it needed to get the answer and hallucinate. So it is something we are constantly monitoring and trying to improve.
Thank you, Craig.
Something that you said about the the way that DOE separates and doesn't give us the true view of what's going on did make me think of one of the projects that we have been working on, something called IP2M Meter,
Yes.
which is, some of you have heard of it, I'm sure. It is, on the surface, it's a framework for getting into a site and assessing a project's environment and maturity, and coming out with a numerical value that says this project is prepared for EVMS in these ways, this project has a mature VMS system in these ways. And I'm no expert on the mathematics behind that, or even the details of how these assessments are conducted. What I am most interested in is that, in addition to people scoring each interview question that they do when they have one of these on-site assessments from 1 to 5, they're asked to deliver a 2 to 3 sentence explanation of why. And so now when we have an on-site review, we're now getting real sentences from real people in all kinds of roles on this on these projects, telling us how they really feel about how things are actually going. And that is absolutely gold for AI mining and assessment to determine what people really think about the project and how it's going on. Rebecca?
Yeah, I just want to let folks know, on YouTube is a video regarding the presentation that we had here in regard to IP2M Meter. And it was focused, Dave Kester did the presentation. It was focused mainly on the environmental module, which seems to be the one that many of the sites truly find illuminating more
Right.
than some of the technical ones. So, but if you're interested, it is on the YouTube channel for CPM. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, the environment is critical, especially when you start to dive into the analysis of text, because I think anyone who's done project management can tell you, if all the people secretly hate each other, or not so secretly hate each other, or not so secretly think that the other people on the project are undertrained or something like that, it really doesn't matter what else is going on. It really doesn't matter how great of a plan you have. Things aren't going to follow the plan, and things aren't going to turn out well. And being able to identify that on day one before you even started digging, that's very valuable.
I agree. One highlight for bias and how people are looking at it. Josh?
Oh boy, getting into my world. So I had a question because so the research we've done on optimistic planning, which then goes into inefficient execution, we find that all the environmental patterns, i.e. cognitive biases, leadership, et cetera, correlate across to safety and risk decision making. So if you have issues in your safety culture, then those same environment issues could be causing optimistic planning and inefficient execution with a low risk identification. So then the question is, can Walt communicate with safety information now or in the future to be able to make those correlations? Because essentially what you could be doing is you could be using AI to automatically look at issues in project management based on safety culture.
That is a great idea. I don't see why not. The real challenge there is making sure you've actually got the input data in the documents, and I'm not sure they share those with us mostly yet. And then B, it will be bringing in the right kind of experts to teach Walt how to think about these things. That is one of the efforts.
Right, because most of the, I think, yeah, and I think, and Becky can probably correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that most of the projects that had project performance issues also had low environment scores.
Yep.
Correct.
And so if we can correlate safety culture issues, we can essentially make predictions in AI about where project performance may land. So
yeah, it would definitely allow you to question some of the projection dates that are put into the PARS database.
Yeah.
Which I often wonder why they aren't questioned more. Daryl?
Craig, for the IPM2 meter, have you implemented a combination between IPM2 meter and Walt, or is it two separate factors?
For now, they're two separate. We don't have much of our IP2 meter data in the same databases as Walt, mostly because we haven't sat down and done the level of privacy, sanitization, all of that data flow piece to be confident before sharing IP2 meter raw textual data results with a larger audience. You know, the last thing we want is for people to get the impression that they're giving their honest assessment during these on-site reviews, and then having it show up in plain text for the person they were talking about to see online. We've done some basic experimenting in the past with anonymizing those kinds of comments by running them through Walt in bulk. We just haven't fully automated the process to make that data more available to systems like Walt.
So it sounds like
Go ahead, Daryl.
Okay. So it sounds like you haven't explored communicating with other chatbots like our famous Microsoft Copilot that's everywhere in our system.
Yeah, but right now, Walt's more of a standalone system just because of the security limitations of working in the government environment. You can see down here we've got this search button, and notice how it's grayed out. Walt does have web search. If you go and open a new chat, there's a web search button that you can ask him to use. But the second Walt touches the PARS databases, he loses access to his web search tool, because the last thing we need is for him to go and read a document about something sensitive and then immediately go type the sensitive thing that he's supposed to keep secret into Google.
Craig, it's a two-way street. It's not just the sensitivity of the data. It's the fact that that data is sucked into the online search engine, and that becomes problematic.
Right.
I just have a question. I know you're working for Amber Young. Does she have a slate of proposed upgrades and extensions to the tool that she's looking at for the next couple years?
We have a short and constantly changing list of tools and improvements. The latest revision to it was rewriting several of the tools until last week, and actually I'm on the test version of Walt, so anyone who actually has day-to-day access to the real version of Walt, this would be a preview for them. This SQL query tool where Walt can write what he believes is real SQL and have it executed is actually a revision that we've just added. And you know, that improved our outcomes pretty significantly in terms of allowing him to do real analysis. We've got a bunch of other things in the pipeline. One of them is a skills system borrowed from the researchers at Anthropic, who have showed some great ideas there, applying a skills system to software development. Essentially, it's just we write a bunch of guidance to Walt on exactly how to do insert project management or earned value analysis process here, and provide those to him so that he knows how to do it our way and knows how to do it correctly, as opposed to just sort of whatever GPT-4o knows, which is probably fine, sometimes definitely not fine. You know, removing the ability for it to be Walt's decision on how he analyzes things. Things like IP2 meter data is definitely another one in the process, working to ingest all of those additional backlog documents for Walt, improving some of his project search tools that are on the list. And really, someone comes up with some sort of new potential use case practically every month, every couple of weeks. Right. One thing I was thinking of doing is custom agents for Walt to allow people to create dedicated agents with dedicated sets of tools, kind of like ChatGPT has their custom GPTs.
Okay. Anything else we should be considering if we were thinking about putting in a similar tool within an organization? What would you tell the PM or the folks that are doing the governance over project management to consider if they're thinking about doing this?
I would say the agentic model is definitely the way to go, and that means the using the tools. I would also say if you've got the ability to, if you've got a software development team in-house, even if they're, you know, a small one that's hopefully now starting to pick up on these AI tools, definitely consider building something on top of a platform like Azure OpenAI, and, you know, doing your own code and development for your own particular use case, as opposed to just buying a complete off-the-shelf end-to-end platform solution, because those tend to slow the process down and have to get adapted to your system and end up becoming more expensive. You know, I was at a conference last week, the GovAI Summit, and I was looking at a lot of these end-to-end finished platform solutions, and they all had 90% of a solution, and they all had a different 90%. So that worried me, thinking about people trying to find the one answer to all of their problems. That may go for just about any government software purchase, really, but with AI in particular, because it's moving so fast and changing so much, being able to get in there and use your software development team to make rapid adjustments is really valuable.
Agreed. Any other questions?
Just a little query there. Sorry, Andrew. Are you saying then, Craig, that you should be as reliant or mostly reliant on your software team or your development people to specify what kind of system should be created, generated? The big question mark in my head is, are they good enough?
So I wouldn't necessarily say that they should be determining the specifications of what your system should do. That's more something that you would tell them to do. But the difference is, you know, if you've got a decent software development team, you can go to them and say, these are my requirements. And there might be some back and forth on which ones are the priorities and what exactly do you mean by that.
Yeah.
But they can build it. They can build the exact list of 7 things you need.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're comparing the different platforms, you're only going to have 5 of the 7 things available on different platforms, and maybe some of them are coming soon, or maybe you get the exact 7 things you need, and then next month when you've got a new revision and a new thing that you need to add to it, well, sorry, we don't support that yet.
Yeah.
You're going to have to wait.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Andrew?
Well, sort of semi-following on from the line of query that we've just been talking about, is if you've got, so this is kind of effectively for the portfolio owner, what you've been describing all afternoon, can you see this, the economies of scale, and the rollout of kind of this, I don't know how you describe it, semi-bespoke, customizable, highly orientated towards security. But can you see it actually being applied to both smaller portfolios? So I'm thinking now of property developers who are wanting to see how their portfolio of projects are going, and then also into kind of program stuff where if you're in NASA or whatever, you can actually start to see how individual bits of your program are doing, or is that already being applied and I'm just ignorant of it?
I think systems like this can absolutely be usable on a much smaller scale, a much more smaller portfolio than it might be obvious for at first. When you're on the ground doing stuff on a project level, for example, or on a site level, that might be where it might make more sense to come in with a platform-based solution. So, for example, if you're on site and everyone's using Microsoft Office and Copilot's there whether or not you want it to be there, Copilot's reading everyone's emails whether or not you want it to be reading the emails, you might as well get something out of it because it's already integrated into all the systems you have. If you're already using your Oracle systems for your project management and Oracle rolls out an AI solution, yeah, that probably makes sense to at least use what's there with your data. From our perspective as the fully external third party, and the only data that we get is the data they manually load into our systems, no one's ever going to let me plug Walt into Los Alamos's Microsoft Copilot to see what all the emails about a project are, even if that would give us fascinating insights into how late things were going to get. That's just simply never going to happen. So I think it really depends what data do you actually have and what data do you manage already, and what tools can you integrate into that. That sort of tells you what makes sense.
Craig, this is Becky. Highlighting part of what you said, your decision to use Copilot or any of the readily available AI tool sets that people may have, you need to have a good governance structure.
Yes.
Because one of the things that you subtly highlighted there is a security issue, which is why many systems are disabling or asking for disablement of Copilot in their systems, is because Copilot does basically use databases to dump information from various emails, etc. While that may be nice to access, there's a privacy, security, data security issue. So I think that one of the things that people need to do before they consider using any of those available tool sets is to have good governance. Because if you don't, things are going to spin out of control very, very fast. I've seen it, and it comes at least within the States and France, because I've worked with a project over there. It comes with a heavy price legally too, if you're not very, very careful. So I want to make sure people are doing the groundwork before they invest in some of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And Copilot's a tricky one because it tries to install itself on absolutely everything, and IT departments are mostly successful at fighting back. My point was more evaluate what AI tools you might already have access to in a secure way. If you're using Copilot, hopefully it's your organization's using Copilot because your IT team's already determined that it's being done in a secure way. You're using it in a government instance or whatever those requirements are, or you're using, I don't know that Oracle's got an AI tool yet, but I'm sure they will at some point. If there's something that sits closer to your data and you can use it securely, at least investigate what options you have there. But yeah, don't just let people blindly install whatever AI tools they want.
Yeah,
On the other
I
hand,
have to say people aren't really aware of what Copilot's doing, nor
fair.
are their computer divisions aware. They really need to do the study. People have this impression that they understand it. They read the blurbs on the net and they feel like they've got their hands around it. You have to do your homework. I mean, it's serious homework that they need to do. So,
yeah, I completely agree there.
okay. Any other questions? Anything else that we should be aware of, Craig?
I think that's everything I was planning on talking about. Daryl got ahead of me there, and the other thing I was going to share was
Daryl gets
the
ahead of all of
benchmarks.
us.
Yes, well, that's what he's here for, right?
Yeah.
Someone's got to show us how it all works. So here we've done some benchmarks on his performance to be able to measure how he's doing. I had a 2-month-long project to optimize and improve his prompts and his tools. But before I could even get started on doing that, the first thing I wanted to do was figure out how to measure how good of a job he's doing, because if you can't do that, you're wasting your time.
Correct.
And then the other thing we're doing here, we're performing not every single conversation because I don't have the token budget for that, but a fair fraction of our conversations, if it's going to load for me. I'm actually running real user conversations through those same metrics to see how much Walt is annoying people. We've got our success metric here, our frustration metric here, and our hallucination metric. So you can see here,
do you
things
have
got a
a
bit
set
better.
of, Craig, do you have a set of definitions for those terms?
Yes.
I've seen them defined differently in different organizations, so.
Yes, I don't have them handy right now, but essentially the definition of those terms is it's an AI prompt, right? That we feed this conversation into an AI and say, based on these requirements, score this conversation on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of success. Did they achieve the user's goals? Things like that. So it is a fixed definition.
Okay, that's what I was asking, because I have seen people use those terms but not have it defined in the system, and their data seems to change each time they ask a question, month to month even. So just curious.
Yeah. So these numbers aren't comparable to any other system out there. This is just an arbitrary 6 or whatever it is. But those definitions do stay constant over the course of the system evaluation. So, whatever happened on June 19th was apparently a rough day for all of the Walt users, or perhaps it was just a few really grumpy users. I don't know. But recently things have been getting better. Maybe, again, with all graphs, it's not really clear what the margin of error on this is, but the idea is to be able to see overall trends at least. And then we did dive in a bit more here in trying to have AI tell us what's going well and what's going wrong, and even suggest improvements to the system. I'm not sure entirely how valuable this is, but it is hopefully at least inspiration for me and the team thinking of things that we might be able to improve.
Is there a point where corrections or preventive actions are put into the system so you can track their effectiveness?
So typically that's just handled on the back end in our software development flow.
Okay.
So if, for
Okay.
example, I wanted to see what happened on this day, I'd go through and I'd find out whether we made changes. Here we've got our list of prompt changes and when I changed them, and then those are logged in more detail in our change logs.
So does the user have access to the knowledge that's contained in those change logs to see why things may have changed over time?
Yes. Not necessarily the best change logs yet. We're still working on them because Walt writes his
Okay.
own change logs. But the user
Good
can
for
come
Walt.
up here and see. It's kind of funny. You can see Walt's here. He's now able to do math rendering support, and then he
Right.
summarizes it, and then he explains to me why he's followed all of my instructions for writing a good release note. Like, didn't need that part, Walt, but thank you.
He's the high
same thing
performer
here.
in school, you know.
Yes. You know, he's got to make sure he gets the good grade.
That's right.
So probably need to do some improvements to these automated release notes, but at least they are they're available.
Okay.
Maybe a final question. I see that time is on the hour mark. What do you do, Craig, or what do you intend to do in terms to encourage its use, to proliferate it? Is there a sort of session that you drum up enthusiasm for it, show its uses, show its purposes, to give it that sort of meaning, so that I must have this in my everyday?
We try to talk about it whenever we have an opportunity to get in front of our users or DOE community users in general. They don't always come up that easily. I know Amber, my boss, was at it was a DOE EM internal conference about a month or so ago, and they invited her to present, and she took the opportunity to show off what Walt could do. And the next day we had like 8 different people emailing us saying, "Hey, can I get a PARS account?"
Yeah, definitely.
So we're just trying to talk about it, and
positive comms and really giving people showing its utility. How it really can be, how it can benefit your work. There are so many things that are, and in the world of standards, we know, I think, Becky, we can confess, we can create a standard, we throw it over the fence, and we expect people to pick it up like it's the tablet of stone and go away and use it all. But do they? No. So we've got to encourage utilization.
Well, absolutely. And perhaps one of the best uses of this is just stimulating conversation.
Yeah. I think so.
I have a hand up from Josh.
Yeah, hopefully you guys can hear me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, my camera quit working, and so did my other microphone. Quick question: do you know if the data you're getting into PARS on each project, are you getting activity durations with those as well? I'm going back to the whole forecast scenario.
Yes, in terms of our raw PARS data, we're getting basically the raw EVMS data from mostly P6 and Cobra. So it will be the P6 activities are coming in there. Now, Walt doesn't directly have access to that because he's just getting the roll-ups, because I haven't inflicted raw EVMS data on his processing yet. That may be one that has to wait for GPT-5 or better tools. But at least he can handle the rolled up numbers.
Okay.
Good.
Perfect.
Daryl?
Greg, just one quick question before we cut off. Have you done some case studies or benchmarks on end user prompt injections? For example, if you were to give this to a customer, can a customer type in on the message box saying, "Hey, I need this and this for this amount of money. Give me a forecasted amount," and they're using some sort of prompt injection?
So done some basic red teaming there. My analysis has basically been there's not much we can do to fight it. So if we're asking it, if you ask Walt to help you create a misleading analysis, he probably will. That is on the end user as far as we're concerned. if you can write a misleading analysis without Walt. He will attempt to push back, but really we're talking about the same GPT 4.0 guardrails that any ChatGPT user has, and as I'm sure you know, you can get past those. From a security perspective, there is absolutely nothing you can ever say to Walt that will ever convince him to give you project data that you don't have access to, because that's not Walt's decision. From a security perspective, a user of Walt can only ever see the data that they are allowed to see, and Walt acting on their behalf can only ever see the data that they are allowed to see.
Right.
Okay. I want to thank you, Craig. This has been fantastic. It's good to see DOE moving ahead with it. You know, obviously from the conversation, many of us wish we could see it do other things, but it does take time. It does take budget. And budget being the holdup right now. So I appreciate
Yes.
everything. Steve, did you want to talk about the next GCC?
Not in any great detail, other than to say that we are having Christmas off. I don't think we'd scheduled anything for December, but the next date, if we get through Christmas, is another Tuesday. It's Tuesday, January the 13th, when we will be
Correct.
hosting the first Conversation Club of 2026, and looking forward to that. You never know, the person who might be delivering that is sitting in this meeting, maybe with his arm, with his hand behind his head. Oh no, he's put it down. Yeah.
Poor Andrew's reevaluating whether he's coming to these anymore.
Yeah. No, but there will definitely be something. There are a couple of topics in hand. It may well focus on the newly arrived control standard that we've been working on, or it may be a taster for the forthcoming EVM standard in April, but a taster maybe. So and as I said, I'll get the recording of this particular conversation club. We shall top and tail it and sort it out, ready for issue to the multitudes who will be wanting to see this, because it'll be raining next Tuesday probably. So we'll issue it on Tuesday, give them something to look at and watch. But great, really good conversation here, Craig. Yeah, there's lots really of there are so many misconceptions potentially with AI, and there is a mission to explain, and I definitely think you're on the right side of the mission to explain. So thank you very much for that. That was a great session.
Thank you.
I agree, and I do appreciate your time and your willingness to accept all the questions that we fired at you. We're relentless.
Those are just as valuable for me. Helps me know how to talk about it, and it helps me know what to build next.
Well, we're a relentless crowd, that's for sure. So we do appreciate it, and we appreciate everyone's time.
Indeed.
And if you know of anybody who would benefit from watching the YouTube of this meeting, just let them know. It'll be out there in the next couple weeks, more than likely. So they can look for it, and they can also see some of the past sessions that we've had. And I will certainly be posting, once Steve is issued, I'll put out a blurb on LinkedIn about it being available. Yes.
One final question, Craig, would you kindly donate your presentation for us to issue as well? Is that possible?
So the presentation I have is the one I gave at the GovAI conference.
Yeah.
I will be happy to share it. It does not have many words on it. So
we like pictures.
Sure. I will absolutely send it over. I don't know whether it has too much value without
on the off chance. On the off chance, but there might be again. It might prompt some more conversation. You never know, but it will be. And it'll have, and potentially it'll have your contact details on if people want to get in touch and follow up with you.
Yeah,
more directly if that's possible. So that would be great. Thank you.
Exactly, it's the contact details that might be of most benefit. Not just for technical reasons, but in case somebody wants to explore what you've done in their own capacity within their own organization. So I appreciate everything. CPM just wants you guys to know that they appreciate you stepping up and attending the session. And CPM intends to continue doing these webinars for the foreseeable future because it benefits all of us. And because we record them, the benefit is a bit far reaching than the attendees. As we all know in the US, this is Veterans Day, and some people may be taking an Armistice Day in other locations.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's Remembrance Day for us today here. You know,
Exactly.
yeah.
So I hope everyone has a good holiday that's been in attendance, and take care, stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks very
Thanks,
much.
Becky.
Goodbye.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Craig.
Becky.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Dave.
Cheers.
Thanks,
See you
Craig.
the next time.